February has started and I was absent for pretty much the whole of January. So here is my what I read in January and 25 for 2025 update, plus a few other things. Hey everyone, it's Ray. Welcome to my little bookish corner of the world, and I hope you are all well. I've been absent for the last almost month. In fact, I think it might be a month. I have still been releasing my podcast content, so if you are interested in listening to a couple of author reviews with some really great authors, head over to listen to those or watch them now. I've been absent because I just started a brand new job. I was hoping to restart the videos with a brand new setting. I ordered a lovely piece of furniture that was going to be the finishing point to my living room, and it has not materialized despite having a delivery date of 10 days following order. Not hugely impressed, but there's nothing I can do about it. It's a case of waiting and hoping that it's not a massive con. Yeah, it's not looking good. But I am here today to talk about my current reading plans, what I read in January, and where I am on my planned 25 books for 2025, which I talked about in a video I'm going to link in the corner. I'm actually doing really well. Surprisingly, having started a new job at the beginning of the month, I was concerned I wouldn't be getting through as many books, though I did have the first 10 days in the month, and I also had the entirety of December because I was made redundant and put on gardening leave. I am in a really, I think, strong position. So I read 12 books in January. It's not as many as I would have liked, but I did make the mistake maybe of picking up a couple of pretty chunky ones, and I took my time with them. And that way I enjoyed them. I think one of the things I'm going to take away from my lessons of last year is that I don't want to rush a book just because I've got another one sitting there waiting for me to read. So I read a total of 12 books, and 4 of those books that I read were from my 25 books for 2025. I'll post a picture in this corner so you can see the 25 books I selected, as well as you can watch the video. And I think that doing that has given me a much stronger start than I had last year. I selected 24 books, a large number of them for 2024 were new releases, so I was subject to the delays that potentially could occur, and there were a few with publication dates. I was also subject to my own mood and will, and at the end of the year, with 3 weeks to go, I still had 5 of my 24 books to read. This year, I have already read 4 of my 25 for 2025, and I am really happy about it. I enjoyed most of them. I actually had a good month in January, far better than, I can't help recalling how many months in 2024 were quite not great reading months. November really does spring to mind, and I think May was a little bit weak as well. There were a considerable number of 2, 3, and 3.5 star reads that I felt were average at best. And this year so far, my ratings have been a little bit higher, for which I'm hugely relieved. So, what did I read? And how did I feel about it? Did I rate them greatly, or were they just a little bit on the side? So, my first book in 2025 was actually admittedly a rush, and it was the Booker Prize winner Orbital by Samantha Harvey. It's a really short book. It's a total of 136 pages, and that is why I selected it to read on the 1st of January. Sounds really bad. I actually selected it because I was in such a hurry. I'd been doing a load of other stuff on the 1st of January. I'd been getting things ready for in preparation for starting my new job, because I was supposed to start on the 6th, but there were some delays courtesy of Royal Mail. And I picked up the book at about 8 o'clock in the evening on the 1st, knowing that I really wanted to read something. And I thought, what better? This is one of my 25 for 2025. It was a Christmas gift off my specific wish list. And I really enjoyed it. There were certain things in there which made me think about the way we perceive the world. If you don't know, it's actually about, it's 6 astronauts and cosmonauts on the International Space Station, and they observe a period in time on Earth and think about their own mortality and the things that are occurring in their own lives on Earth at the same time. There are certain observations in the book that really made me think, including one about the cyclical stages of life, with the you start, you're born, you die, you replenish the earth with your ashes, that kind of thing. And also about the way that our existence is a blip in the scheme of everything that's happening on Earth. We have all the periods of Jurassic, Cretaceous, Neanderthal, and everything else, and the human existence is mere milliseconds in the hours and decades that the Earth has existed. And I really enjoyed this particular observation of the planet and how we as a species exist within the Earth's time frame. So that was Orbital, and I gave it 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed it. It was a great start to the new year, because I wasn't sure about it. I heard a few things about it, and I thought 136 pages is very short. It's actually really the length of a novella. It's a very tiny book, and I thought, it's going to be an interesting read. I might enjoy it, I might not. It's no skin off my nose if I don't. And I ended up really taking quite a lot away from it. So it was a lovely way to start the new year. The next book I picked up was my first big chunky book. It was a fantasy, and it was Quicksilver by Callie Hart, the first in her Fae and Alchemy series. The second one, I believe, comes out in November this year, and I've already pre-ordered the special edition. Now, I gave this book 4.5 stars. However, I do still think that I know I have a bit of a thing about the Fae world and fantasy. I've never been a fan of ACOTAR. I struggled with the first 2 books and discarded the entire series when I'm not going to spend my time going, I'm going to read this and suffering through it, which is how I felt I was doing with A Court of Mist and Fury. I have got a video about that, so check that out if you want to. But Quicksilver was quite interesting. I didn't really think of them as being in the Fae world, because of the way that they conversed. It wasn't the most important thing. There's also obviously the element regarding vampires, so there's vampiric fae in the book as well, and I tend to separate them out a little bit, and I did enjoy the characters and their relationships. I felt that they were, there was a sort of element of insta love. But I liked the fact that they were introducing her as a human that potentially had an interesting Fae ancestry. So, it wasn't the best book, but when I was reading it, I gave 4.5. I will probably at a later date review it, go back and put it down to possibly a 4. I'm using my ratings on Storygraph because I do think they are far easier to give a closer, more interesting view than looking at a book and going, I gave it 2 stars or I gave it 4 stars, because there are certain books that are closer to a 4.25 than a 4.5, which means they'd realistically be a 4 on Goodreads or Amazon, but they are a 4.5 or 4.25, not a 4 or a 5. I read Quicksilver and it took me 3 days. I read it from the 2nd to the 4th, and I was trying to get through some books, so I had a nice backlog of, if things get really busy at work, I'm not going to feel like reading at lunchtime. I'm going to be too tired to read when I finish the day. it hasn't actually worked out that way. My new job is fantastic, but it is one of those things where I was kind of giving myself a little bit of strength on my reading numbers, which shouldn't be that important because reading should be about enjoying the book. So that was Quicksilver, my second read of the year. Then we get to the second of my 25. We are in 2025, Rachel. My second book of my 25 for 2025, and that was Thieves Gambit, the first in the Thieves Gambit series by Kavian Lewis. This is a YA novel. I purchased it at the beginning of 2024. It was actually a purchase I made as I was on my way to the hospital for an operation. And I thought maybe I'd get a chance to read it in the waiting room or in the recovery room after I came out from the anaesthetic, but I didn't feel like it. So I came home and I shoved it back on the shelf, and it stayed there until I purchased the sequel, which is called Heist Royale. It's another pretty, it's got sprayed blue edges and it looks lovely. The series looked intriguing. It's about a young girl who is part of a criminal family, and she joins the Thieves Gambit, which is a competition that pits the children of crime families against each other. So they become the tool of a larger crime organisation for a year. They get remuneration for it, and they are the one surviving person. It's kind of like a Hunger Games for thieves, but there isn't any death that we know of. I wanted to love this book. I read the back blurb and thought, oh, this sounds quite interesting. It sounds like a nice, enjoyable, quick read. It's not very thick. It's 368 pages, and the story sounded intriguing. And I really found myself bored. With a book that long, I don't expect to find myself thinking, when is this going to be over? But I honestly thought, how long is this actually going to be? I didn't care about the characters. I didn't care if they survived. There was a moment where one of the characters gets shot, and it was like, oh, okay, whatever. That's not a good way to feel about characters you are supposed to be empathizing with, sympathizing with. It is the sort of feeling that you get when you're reading about someone you hate or really dislike in a book, and you're supposed to like these people. You're supposed to warm to them. And by the end of the book, I didn't care about anyone, including our heroine and the supposed hero stroke anti-hero. So I ended up giving the book 2.75 stars, and I read it in one day. That's how quick it was. It was a very, very speedy read because it is quite short. But I really found myself wishing I'd picked up anything else. It was another great big tick off the 25 for 2025 list, but it isn't a book that I will likely revisit. Yes, I am going to still read the sequel because I would like to see if we get a better rounding of the characters, dig deeper into who they are, because our main character in this book just wants to escape her mother's overbearing ruling, and she wants to become a gymnast or a dancer. She's got a place at a reputable dancing or gymnastics school, and that's what she's originally running away to. And then her mother gets captured or kidnapped on their last mission together, and that's when she realizes, I mean, they're asking for silly things like, I want $1 billion from you. The kidnappers demand $1 billion from her for the release of her mother. And that's how she gets into the whole, oh, well, you were given this invitation to the Thieves Gambit, and she decides to take part because at the end of it, the surviving or successful competitor gets a wish that this organisation will grant. So her determination is she is going to wish for the freedom of her mother, because that's better than wishing for $1 billion. So that's Thieves Gambit, and yeah, it's not the best. It may well be massively exciting for a younger YA audience, but it didn't adapt well to an adult audience, in my personal view. So 2.75 stars. The next one was the first book club read of 2025, and it was my friend Laura's pick, Neuromancer by William Gibson. Said to be the first punk sci-fi novel. It actually was written a good 20 years after Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick, which I think is the superior. They are making a TV series of it, I believe, on Apple TV, due for release this year, maybe. I've never been so confused in my life. I honestly, if anybody can actually give me a decent summary of what this book is about, I would be incredibly grateful. Am I going to deny that it was well written? No. But I'm also going to say I have no idea what it was about. And for that reason alone, it was rated the same as Thieves' Gambit, 2.75. I was so confused throughout the whole thing. I didn't know where we were. I didn't know what the purpose of the story was. I didn't know what the character's end goal was. I know it's the first in the Sprawl series, but I was so confused that I ended the book, and when we had our book club meeting, I honestly said, I don't know what it was I was reading. And I don't like feeling that way. I don't like coming away from a book thinking, well, what exactly was that about and why did I read it? So I came away from it thinking, no, I'm not going to pick up another one by William Gibson, but it has made me want to revisit Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which I first read when I was doing my degree back in 2005. So yeah, that I think that what it's done is encourage me to go back and read a book that I enjoyed reading and comprehended, though it did end on a bit of a questionable, it ended on an almost Inception-like cliffhanger. Very cleverly done, but Neuromancer by William Gibson just left me feeling odd, I think, is the best way to describe it. The next book I read was Spells, Strings and Forgotten Things by Brianne Randall. It comes out in February, so this was an ARC I received kindly from the publishers at Head of Zeus. And it was a fantasy. It was about a family of witches, 3 sisters, and it even is marketed as kind of for those who love Charmed. And I did love Charmed. I loved the first few series before Shannon Doherty left far more than I liked the series, the ones later on. But it was a wonderful story. There's this trio of sisters, and they are trying to preserve their magic as it is. However, every single time they use their powers, they have to sacrifice a memory. Along comes a family that is against them or is seen to be against them. Their magic is completely the opposite of their own. And there are a lot of conflicting emotions. I don't want to go into the story in depth. I think that it's one that you might enjoy, especially if you love things like the Bell Witches. You will enjoy this story. And I came away from it with a happy, I understood this, I know where it's going after reading Neuromancer. And it was a welcome refresh of a good book when I was able to give it a 4-star review and just breathe a sigh of relief, because it was well written, it was fun, it was lighthearted, it was almost, there were moments that were quite dark, and there is a rather unkind death in the book. I'm not going to say it's all sweetness and light, but then I don't think any fantasy really is pure and innocent and lighthearted all the time, because there needs to be an element of peril. So reading Spells, Strings and Forgotten Things, there was that familiar Charmed peril, because you do have in that there are people that die. Obviously, we do have one of the sisters die in I want to say the 3rd season. That's really bad. If you know when her character died, Shannon Doherty's character died let me know in the comments. I'm going to have to go and look it up. But it had that kind of almost light-hearted peril to it. There were some moments where you did wonder if the sisters were going to be successful. And of course you have the classic love interest, but he's not necessarily the classic because he is the bad boy. That again is cliche, but he's the bad boy who is also from the competing family, and his motives are questionable. So I gave that book 5 stars, and I finished it on the 11th of January. In fact, I started it on the 7th. So it was a good few days read, but purely because I had just started my new job. The next book is another on my 25 for 25, so there's a third book to tick off that list. And it was also an ARC, The Antique Hunter's Death on the Red Sea by C.L. Miller. It's the sequel to The Antique Hunter's Guide to Murder. I'm trying to find, yep, I can see the original. I received that as an ARC as part of a book tour, and The Antique Hunter's Death on the Red Sea I received as an ARC from Pam Macmillan. I loved this series. I really enjoyed the first book and being introduced to our main characters. So reading the sequel was incredibly fun. It was one of those, it wasn't easy. We were introduced back to Freya Lockwood, who is the antique hunter, and her ever-present aunt Carol, who is hilariously funny. She is always trying to stick her nose in. She thinks she's helping. She wants to be involved, but she doesn't always help. And on this occasion, Carol and Freya are invited on a cruise down the Nile, visiting multiple places, and they are trying to discover what happened. There was a murder behind a small town museum, and a painting was stolen that their ex-business partner stroke ex-mentor provided to the museum, which had been doctored some way. So they are trying desperately to discover who these smugglers of stolen antiquities and smuggled antiquities are, and also discover the identity of an art trafficker who is central to all of it, who organizes all of it, called the Collector. Of course, they meet up with the FBI agent who they previously were involved with in the first book, and they get into a lot of danger. There's a lot of peril in this book. I do like a book with a bit of peril in it, as long as it's not realistic. And they also meet up with another of the thieves that was involved in the first book. But the adventure is more to do with them establishing themselves as an antique hunters detective agency, and proving that they are just as capable as their predecessor. So I enjoyed this book. I am looking forward to the third one. This book comes out on the 12th of February, so definitely get your orders in. And if you haven't read it already, I honestly would recommend The Antique Hunter's Guide to Murder, which is a fun, locked or isolated location murder mystery with a lot of hidden antiques and a smuggled mummy. Very, very similar to this one, but exciting all the same. The next book that I read in January was another ARC that was sent to me by Quercus, and it is one of the most adorable books I have read so far this year. It's Life Hacks for a Little Alien by Alice Franklin. You may have seen it a number of places. The cover is really cute. It's about a young girl inspired by Alice Franklin's own experiences, a young girl who is undiagnosed autistic. She knows she's different, hence the little alien, and all her observations of life as she sees it. Her mother has also got, her mother has mental health issues, and poor little alien, who is never given a name throughout the entire book, observes her mother, observes her father and their relationship, makes a friend but struggles with making friends and maintaining a friend group at school. She is obsessed with facts and gets hyper focused on things. And there is this incredible moment where she finds something to be interested in that leads her on a fascinating journey, including not exactly running away, but disappearing to see the Voynich manuscript. Now, this led me down an interesting rabbit hole of my own, in that I ended up researching, because there were certain things mentioned, like I did not realise that the person who owned the Voynich manuscript is actually connected to, indirectly, or married to the great niece of the person for whom the Mount Everest is named. And that sent me down an incredibly long rabbit hole. So I identify with our little alien quite well, because I tend to also hyperfocus quite a lot. It was a wonderfully beautiful book, and you can't help but feel for this unnamed character. She's not like the lady in Rebecca, who is forever known by the name of her husband and never given an identity of her own. She has an identity. She is the little alien. She doesn't feel like she belongs anywhere. And this journey of self-discovery that she goes on, the interest she has in the Voynich manuscript, and the way that she is so interested in making her own way and being her own person, even though she knows that makes her different to everyone else, gave me warm and fuzzy feelings. The book comes out on the 13th of February, so not that far away, and I gave it 4.25 stars because it made me assess my own childhood behaviours quite a lot. My mum did say I should have been assessed at some point, but I wasn't. But anyhow, that's neither here nor there. That is Life Hacks for a Little Alien by Alice Franklin, and I would definitely recommend, if you want a book that gives you warm feeling but also makes you think about how you've perceived certain people in your life or yourself, then I would definitely recommend you read it. The next book I read was for the Agatha Christie read along for 2025, which started at the beginning of the month, or the beginning of the year, beginning of 2025. And this year, instead of going through the decades as they did in 2024, they are looking at careers. So in January, the book was Five Little Pigs, which is number 24 in the Hercule Poirot series. And it is about an artist, or rather it is about the murder of an artist. And it is one of the first cold cases I've read that Hercule Poirot has been involved with solving. A young girl comes to Poirot asking for his help in clearing her mother's name. Her mother, 20 years before, was found guilty of murdering her husband, Ammius, an artist, a well-known artist, because he'd been cheating on her. The young girl doesn't believe her mother did it. She received a letter from her as an adult, and all of that's said in the letter makes her believe that whatever happened, however, the fact that her mother was found guilty in a court of law, she was not guilty of the murder. Sadly, her mother has passed away. She died a year after she was found guilty of the murder, but that doesn't mean she doesn't want to clear her mother's name. So Hercule Poirot goes into it, and using the nursery rhyme of Five Little Pigs, in the modern day it's this little piggy went to market, this little piggy stayed at home, this little piggy ate roast beef, this little piggy ate none, and this little piggy went wee 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 all the way home. The poem is slightly changed in the book to fit the purpose that it holds, but we get to meet all the main characters in the murder, those people that were actually at the house when the artist was murdered. He was poisoned. It was originally believed to be a suicide, given the fact that he drank a poisonous liquid. And through piecing all their stories together, Hercule Poirot comes up with his own theories on what happened. I gave this 4.5 because I enjoyed it incredibly, And I think it's one of those books, I'd never read it before. I don't recall watching the Poirot ITV series episode of it, which I am sure there was. And I think it's one that I would like to go back now I've read the book and watch. It's an interesting mystery. As I said, it is a cold case. And I think that the way it was pieced together is, as ever, very cleverly done, because the motive is there, the story all through all of the threads. It's just not incredibly clear until Poirot goes, I have solved it. And he pieces everything together and explains exactly why A plus B equals C. Plus or minus the square root of 4A. That's the only piece of algebra I actually remember from school. The next book was Another Arc. It was also one of my 25 for 2025 and is part of a book tour that I'm on the 3rd of February. So as I'm filming this, tomorrow. That is The Queen of Fives by Alex Hay. I truly enjoyed The Housekeepers last year. It was almost like an Ocean's 8 stroke Ocean's 11 with Victorian criminals, all of them women. And The Queen of Fives is an intriguing story. I absolutely adored the characters. This book was published on the 30th of January this year. It was from Headline Publishers, and it is absolutely fascinating. It's not using the same characters as we met in The Housekeepers. Instead, it is about a lady called Quinn LeBlanc, who is the Queen of Fives. She is the Queen of the Con in that particular area of London. She masquerades as a wealthy debutante to trap a man into marriage so she can persuade him to give her money, because her house is in ruin, her career is not doing very well, and she knows that this could set her up for life. She is the jewel of the season. She has a previously unmarried, intrigued man at her mercy, a duke, no less. But his sister is questioning her motives, because she doesn't want, if he marries, she loses her position in his household, and she is sure that her stepmother feels the same. Of course, underlying all of this is another mystery. There is someone out to get Quinn, to expose her for who she is, but also to ensure that her career as the Queen of Fives is over. And it is this mystery that lies beneath everything that Quinn is doing that is fascinating. The way that Alex Hay intertwined these two stories of these two women who are at loggerheads but also have exactly the same goal in mind is wonderfully done. And I'm not going to give away the twist, because I know it would absolutely ruin it for anybody who decides to pick it up. But that twist is one that had me gasping. I'd seen a couple of hints, and then certain things happened, and it was like, no, there's no way that's what's happening. There's no way this is the person that's done this, that, and the other. And when the final reveal came, it was like, whoa, how did I not see that coming? And it was so cleverly done that I really didn't. So I gave The Queen of Fives 4.5 stars. And I am really looking forward to my day on the book tour on the 3rd. So keep an eye out on my socials. I will post them in the video below, in the box below, rather, the video below. So you can check it out, because this is probably going to go live after I've released my review. Editing Ray here, so greatly apologise. Look like an absolute mess. I'm about to start working in 20 minutes or so. Hit a slight technical hitch with the next section when I was recording, and hadn't noticed that the sound quality changed just a tad, so I apologise in advance. Book 10 of January was an interesting one. It was the sequel to a book I really enjoyed back in 2023 Grave Expectations by Alice Bell. So I read the sequel, Displeasure Island, which came out originally in 2024. However, I have a funny thing about buying a series that is two different versions. I don't like having paperback and hardback in the same series, which is why I'm still holding out on Murder on the Marlow Bell, which doesn't come out until later this year in paperback. So Displeasure Island came out in paperback at the beginning of January, so I immediately ordered it and read it very quickly after it arrived because I couldn't wait to find out what happened to Claire, Sophie, Basher and Alex. Most series, for example, Death on the Red Sea and An Antique Hunter's Guide to Murder, which is a good series, you don't have to read the first book in order to understand the second. That's not always the case. I don't think I would ever recommend to anybody that they read my next read for January in that way. But with Displeasure Island and Grave Expectations, they lead on from each other. So Displeasure Island follows very quickly on from the occurrences in Grave Expectations. And when we re-meet with Basher, Alex, Sophie and Claire, they are still recovering from the events that led them to become friends. Of course, Sophie has always been friends with Claire because Sophie is Claire's spirit guide or dead friend who died at 17 and has been haunting Claire ever since. But the events lead on very quickly from what occurred in Grave Expectations. So reading the second book without the first leaves you on the back foot as a reader. I would honestly recommend, in fact, somebody asked me on socials, they said that they just purchased Displeasure Island and they saw it was a sequel, should they read the first one? And my advice is 100% yes. Sadly for me, though it was still enjoyable, I didn't like Displeasure Island as much as I enjoyed the events in Grave Expectations. I liked meeting all our characters, getting to know them and finding out how they came to be where they were and who they were. And Displeasure Island, because we already have that knowledge, it doesn't introduce any new characters in the same way. There is one, but he's not really there. He's not part of the group. And this group have created kind of a circle of protection around their friendship. And I appreciate that because it is difficult to make friends at any time of life, especially when you are in your early 30s or 20s. It can be harder to make friends than when you're at school with a load of people that you have seemingly got a lot in common with. So I gave Displeasure Island a 3.75. Possibly might upgrade it, but I doubt it. And I am still looking forward. I do hope that we get more adventures with these characters because I love Sophie's sarcasm so much. She is a classic 17-year-old girl who is dead because she's a ghost, and she is able to say everything that comes to mind with no repercussions whatsoever, apart from making her friend Claire look like she's completely bonkers. So yeah, that was my 10th read of the year. Now, I've kind of mentioned my 11th read in passing in saying that this is one book I would not recommend anybody pick up if they haven't read the others in the series, and that is the most anticipated release for fantasy readers in 2025, Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros, the third in the Empyrean series, and what I really hoped would be providing a lot of answers to the questions that arose from Iron Flame. That wasn't me forgetting the title, that was me actually crying a little bit inside, because all this book did for me personally was ask more and more questions. We found out the answer to pretty much nothing. We were introduced to a multitude of new characters, so many that I can barely remember their name, and the characters that we already knew, like Brennan and Mira and Sawyer and Riddock and Zayden and Garrick and Jessamine and Yeah, there's so many, and we get all these new characters introduced, and all of a sudden my mind starts building to the point where it's going to go. In fact, yeah, that was it. It was too much. And the knowledge and the information that it is possibly going to be 2 years before we see the fourth book in the series. I get why Rebecca Yarros is holding fire on releasing anything. She's going to take a breath. She's going to write another romance novel. And yeah, I honestly get it. However, this book asked so many questions and provided us with, as the reader, with so little information. It was almost like we were, well, it wasn't almost like we were voyaging from one place to the next place to the next place. And at every single location, we were learning different customs, different people, but we weren't getting any answers to the questions that they were actually going for. And I found myself quite frustrated. My initial fears when it came to Onyx Storm, given the fact that my copy actually took a considerable period of time to arrive, was, is it going to be a filler? Is it going to be something that is just there for the sake of being there? And I have long held the belief that the Empyrean series only needed to be 2 or 3 books in total anyway. So finding out that it's 5 books, that it could be 2 years until the next book, and then reading through Onyx Storm and coming away with nothing new frustrated me just a tiny bit. Does that mean I'm not going to read the next one? No, I'm definitely going to read the next one. Does it mean that I'm going to go into it with as much, oh my gosh, I can't wait to read this book, it is amazing? No, I'm not. The end of the book especially left me frustrated and a little bit annoyed. It legitimately, on my in my copy, and probably a lot of people's copies, I don't know what the UK version looks like, as I had mine shipped from Barnes and Noble, because I couldn't get the special edition from Waterstones, but I have since ordered the special edition from Fairy Loot. Yeah, I have a problem. It ends, it's legitimately, it's almost as though it's been cramped onto the bottom of the final page of the book, and it is just that one line. And while I appreciate, yes, it's great to end on a cliffhanger, I wanted some answers. I didn't want to go away from the book feeling as though it was a massive to the readers. And personally, that's how I felt. Yeah, so I didn't give this book as high a rating as I gave Fourth Wing, which I really enjoyed. I gave this a 4-star, which is probably going to go down to a 3.75 when I have a bit more time to think about it. I do believe that the relationship between Xaden and Violet is somewhat destructive, in actually not even somewhat, it's massively destructive, and I am in the process of planning a video on toxic relationships in fantasy and why they seem to be the done thing. But yeah, I did wish that she would step away from him and go, you know what, you keep on pushing me away, I don't need this anymore, I'm going out with Riddoch instead. Because for some reason he really did come out of this with far less red flags than Xaden. And Xaden went into the book with a ton of them to start with. So yeah, that was book 11 of the month. And then because I was just on a bit of a fantasy high after that point, I read The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent, the first in the Crowns of Nyaxia series and the first in the Nightborn duology. I started on the 30th of January. I started the second in the series, but I knew that I wasn't going to finish that by the end of the month. So that is going to be the first of my February finishes. I'm only just halfway through it as I record this now because I've been so busy doing other things. But I enjoyed The Serpent and the Wings of Night. I found the characters intriguing. I loved Aurea. I actually really like the name Aurea, and I'm not normally a fan of these made-up fantasy names. Rain, on the other hand, what the heck is with that extra H? But I did enjoy their dynamic. I do wish that they hadn't been involved in such an insta attraction relationship. And my favorite character in the entire book, and I think that the next series is about her, is Misha. I really enjoyed her character. I like the fact that she seems almost bubbly, almost elfin in behavior. There's something about her that's cute and sweet. I'm not going to say that she is always going to be cute and sweet, because she has got a ruthless side to her, but there's something about her vulnerability that appeals, whereas we know that Araya is going to be tough and she is determined, frustrating. She is the classic strong female character that is the lead of her own story, and she isn't going to take any rubbish from Rain. She kind of does, but I don't think she will continue to. As I said, I'm only halfway through the second book, so I'm intrigued to find out how that ends. But that was my 12th book of the month, The Serpent and the Wings of Night, and I gave it 4.25 stars. I really enjoyed reading it, and I have to be honest, the answers that we got at the end of the book, even though we did get an open ending because the sequel was already planned, was far preferable for me to Onyx Storm. So there you go. There are my 12 books in January, and my 4 books from my 25 for 2025 as well, which is really good. I'm so happy that I managed to get that far in the series. In total, this over January, I managed to read 12 books, which is 19% of my overall 63 book reading goal, and I set myself a target of 20,013 pages. Yes, I have a thing about the number 3. We don't need to go there. And out of that, so far, I have read 24% of my goal, which is 4,850 pages. So I'm doing pretty well. How are you doing on your set reading goals? Did you even set reading goals? And I'm looking forward to, at some point, recording from my new setup. And until then, this is me saying bye.